Good evening. Welcome to the Pearl Report. I'm Diana Lin. You've been diagnosed with a serious illness, but what if the doctor is wrong? A study this year by the Mayo Clinic in the United States found 88% of its patients who sought a second medical opinion left with a different diagnosis. Producer Renata Reyes examines why this service has spawned the fastest growing multi-billion-dollar industry worldwide.
No fever. She is now almost 9 months old. I am a pediatrician by training, practicing in Hong Kong since 1978 as a medical officer in the public sector. And then I later on had my own private practice. Sleep for how many hours a day?
4 or 5 hours straight. Then she'll continue to eat and she will sleep again.
The baby developed fever in July. Her parents, Kenneth, a Singaporean, and his mainland wife rushed her to hospital in Zhongshan, Guangdong province, where they live.
I brought her to the A&E. They treat it like it's normal. Oh, infection. Take these 2 packets of medicine, and some kind of Chinese medicine. But it did not really work. It did not recover for about 5 days.
He brought her to Dr. Chan's Mong Kok Clinic to get a second medical opinion and Western medicine.
She had a fever, 40 degrees Celsius, and with our medicine, she had no more fever after 2 doses. Today, she is going to have the vaccination for the meningitis.
What is this?
Since then, Kenneth has had his baby vaccinated in Hong Kong.
I feel more comfortable. The medical is much better.
They trust the doctors in Hong Kong. Parents don't have confidence in the medical service in mainland China because of the news of fake vaccine. Here, everything is authentic and genuine. If the people demand instant noodle service, they like to have immediate recovery.
So patients, Dr. Chan says, go doctor shopping for a second medical opinion, which today has spawned one of the fastest growing industries worldwide.
The market is around $1.8 billion globally. Asia Pacific market is around $400 million. Chronic diseases are growing all over the world. The population is aging. Along with that, rising preventable medical errors. The market is estimated to grow at around 13 to 15% year on year for coming 5 years.
A market driven not by individual doctors, but major hospitals. Companies that specialize in offering a second medical opinion in the US and Europe, as well as insurance firms that cover the service. Johns Hopkins Neurosurgery Center and Memorial Sloan Kettering Center in the United States charge between $1,500 to $2,500 for a one-off opinion.
We expect in 2020 the second opinion market to reach over $3 billion. Did you see the survey results? The survey results are really impressive.
Sigo Atzman is the CEO of a second medical opinion provider based in London with branches in Israel and, as of last year, in Hong Kong.
I come from Belgium, where I was born and grew up. I studied in Switzerland in the world of investments and finance. After my 3rd child, I was at the age of having my first mammogram. I was sitting actually in the waiting room, and this other person asked me, "Oh, are you scared?" And I said, "No, why should I be?" And then she told me, "Well, you know, something could go wrong." I realized that a minute from now, the technician could give me a news that is going to change my life. God bless, I didn't have cancer, but I realized how difficult it is for people to realize now they have to make so many difficult decisions. Patients don't have that knowledge. They need advocates to make sure that they can make the decisions for what is best for them.
Of the cases handled by her company worldwide, 23% of patients had a change of diagnosis after a second opinion, and 43% in treatment plan. 90% stick to the second opinion. The figures are higher for Hong Kong, especially cases involving private doctors, because they often work alone.
He gives you his opinion, and that is it. It's not a multidisciplinary approach, and it's not a collaborative process. The public system is managed in a very collaborative way with multidisciplinary approach. For example, with cancer cases, you have tumor boards. It's no one-man decision about a treatment.
Richard's son is a case in point. An accountant from Britain who's been living in Hong Kong with his wife and 3 kids for 7 years now. Richard's 4-year-old child suffers from a growth disorder.
He was born very premature, like 30, 32 weeks. He'd be 80% of the height of his peers, 8 inches shorter than his peers. If he's here, they're here, and that's very stark. The older he gets and the bigger his peers get, the more he's called a baby. He's not very happy about being called a baby.
In January 2015, Richard consulted a private pediatric specialist. His son underwent various tests, including whether his bones were growing at the expected rate.
He did a lot of tests and came back with the kind of he's just small diagnosis. We just weren't satisfied with that answer. We felt we didn't actually get a diagnosis.
In July 2016, Richard flew his son to a private pediatric expert in Britain. After a series of similar tests, the specialist diagnosed the boy with Russell Silver syndrome, or RSS. Found in 1 in 100,000 people, kids with this rare genetic disease don't speak, learn, and grow at the rate expected of a child and have skeletal deformities. Children with RSS are skinny, have a triangular face, prominent forehead, or narrow chin. The head is normal, so it looks big on a tiny body. The face is quite distinct, except
If you look at the photos of Russell Silver online, they just don't look like him. The more we thought about it, the less we were convinced it was correct.
the British paediatric specialist had given Richard's son a genetic test.
The genetic test, it wasn't a positive test for Russell Silver syndrome. The diagnosis is mainly based on a clinical diagnosis only.
Dr. Jason Wan is a case manager for the company Richard hired to give him what is now his 3rd medical opinion.
Is this diagnosis correct? Have all the right tests been done to prove that this is the correct diagnosis? And then if treatments are required, what are the options?
The company looked for a suitable specialist and found one in France.
Who had just written a paper on Russell Silver syndrome and had come up with a 5-point grading scheme for clinical symptoms, and took our son's data and plotted it on her newly concocted scale and said the diagnosis of Russell Silver was incorrect. I suppose I was a little bit upset because we thought we'd done the right thing by going to the hospital, this very good hospital in the UK. We spent quite a lot of money. All the tests between £6,000 and £8,000.
His quest for what ails his son, James, finally ended in Hong Kong.
We arranged for James to see one of the leading genetic specialists at Queen Mary Hospital.
We went completely around the world, but ultimately the right outcome was kind of a diagnosed 10 minutes from our house. Yes, ironic indeed.
James is actually a very lovely kid. I saw him in December last year.
Within 20 minutes of examining the boy's face, Dr. Brian Chung suspected a misdiagnosis. The kid has an even rarer genetic disease, floating harbor syndrome. First described in 1970, only 50 such cases are known worldwide. Some of its symptoms, the short stature, delayed bone age, learning disability, are similar to RSS. But the facial features are distinct: large nose, thin lips, deep-set eyes. Dr. Chung used facial recognition software to match James's photos against a database of computer-generated faces of children with genetic diseases.
And the computer system also think that this is a condition that we must consider. But still, this is not a confirmed diagnosis. The level of suspicion is only medium.
A genetic test later detected the floating harbor syndrome gene in James's DNA. Richard's son is now being monitored by a multidisciplinary team of experts in Queen Mary Hospital and undergoing growth hormone therapy.
If you assume, the average height for somebody with floating harbour is around and about just maybe under 5 foot. If you give him growth hormones, it might be an extra 2 or 3 inches, 5'3", 5'4", if everything goes well. We could have easily gone down the Russell Silver line and making different decisions based on misdiagnosis.
Decisions like James having children based on the mistaken belief he couldn't pass his gene to the next generation. The recurrence rate for RSS is almost 0. For floating harbour syndrome, 50%.
Don't take no for an answer. If it doesn't feel right or it hasn't been confirmed with a blood test so that it clearly is right, just keep pushing.
Up next, after the break, are Hong Kong doctors too quick to suggest costly treatment?
Hong Kong, very, very surgery savvy.
You have to trust the doctors.
And the downside of diagnosis online.
Physical examination is a must.
It doesn't really matter. In cases where there's no need for a physical examination.
Stay with us. Welcome back to the Pearl Report. The internet has made it easier to consult doctors overseas for a second medical opinion. But how accurate is medical advice given without physically examining a patient? And what can a patient do if there's a conflict of views? Xenia worked as a corporate executive for 10 years. She quit to become a housewife after contracting cancer.
I live a healthy lifestyle. I do scuba diving, I do kickboxing, I visit gym regularly, I did regular body checkup every year. I had a few lymph nodes swollen, the left and right side of my neck. I did a biopsy in June, year 2016. I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was depressed, of course. I just got married and I got a late-stage cancer.
After 6 months of chemotherapy, Xenia is now in remission. Her doctor has suggested another type of chemotherapy, target therapy, which works on specific genes or proteins in cancer cells.
My doctor said a traditional PET scan will not able to pick up small cancer cells. If it appears clear in a PET scan, it doesn't mean you're clear.
Her doctor has recommended 6 doses of target therapy over 6 months. It costs, on average, $15,000 a month.
Hi, how are you?
Xenia sought a second medical opinion from Siegel's company that's also covered by her insurance. The verdict by overseas specialists: don't do it.
They think it's not necessary to have 6 dosage. After a confirmed remission, target therapy is expensive.
Medically, I'm not agree with it.
Dr. David Seltzer, an internal medicine specialist, is Siegel's global medical director. He supervises specialists, including the 5 who handled Xenia's case.
It's unnecessary. It's not according to US guidelines, Europe guidelines. We consulted with the leading specialists in Hodgkin lymphoma in the US, in Europe, and said it's not indicated.
Xenia's local doctor and Siegel's company compromised by halving her therapy from 6 to 3 doses.
She has some numbness and some pain in the legs and in the hands. It can be from all cycles of the chemotherapy. Part of it can be from the target therapy also.
Dr. Seltzer says studies have shown target therapy has side effects.
20% of the patients that gets target therapy has neuropathy. Also you have, as I said, anemia, thrombocytopenia, leukopenia, and the 2 cases that had encephalopathy.
Siegel says 55% of her clients had reconsidered radical treatment after a second opinion. She said Hong Kong doctors tend to take a more aggressive approach to treatment. Take surgery.
The UK market is more conservative, less aggressive, and they opt less faster for the surgical approach. Hong Kong and Asia are very, very surgery savvy.
Dr. Alvin Chan, Vice Chair, Hong Kong Medical Association.
Do you agree to the perception that doctors in Hong Kong are too aggressive?
No, I don't think so. You have to trust the doctors who are professional. If you don't trust the doctor, then everything he does, and you suspect him to be too aggressive, he's money conscious, and he's greedy. If the professional advice is not followed, then there could be consequences.
But for some people, trust is hard to build when consultations are over in a few minutes.
A very quick process, which is probably why I wanted the second opinion.
Chi Ip, a banker, hurt his knee while playing field hockey recently.
I went training, there was no warm-up, and within the first minute I hurt my knee. Players, there was a bit of a twisting motion.
He had an MRI scan and consulted a private orthopedic specialist who recommended surgery.
I mean, it's not every day that you hurt your knee, so when you see a specialist, you expect a little bit more of an introduction, but instead it was very, very rushed. He went through the MRI scans very, very quickly, and then said, we think you might need surgery. And that was it. It felt like a 3-minute, 5-minute consultation.
4,000 Hong Kong dollars.
Doctors in Hong Kong, especially specialists, are very busy and they have very packed schedules. They sometimes feel a bit shy if they have additional questions.
A survey found only 55% of Hong Kong patients asked additional questions. Women tend to ask more than men.
When something happens to your body and potentially requires surgery, you want to be sure.
Chi sought a second medical opinion, which confirmed he needs knee surgery.
It was kind of closure, peace of mind. Within 24 hours, I received a nice little summary of the second opinion result.
So this is our website.
Chi sought his second medical opinion through this website that offers advice on radiology results. From MRI, CT and PET scans, X-rays and ultrasound given by specialists in Europe and the United States within 48 hours. All for 399 Hong Kong dollars, the cheapest rate.
You select which kind of scan type it is.
Martin Quick used to work for a medical supplies company before opening a second medical opinion startup a year ago.
You had an MRI and you have an issue with your knee and a doctor suggests surgery and you're not sure surgery is really required. You can go to our website. You can upload your medical information. We see a lot of orthopedic cases. In a lot of cases, surgery is not the answer. Physiotherapy, braces or rest, that can help solve the issue.
This is the top of the neck. Any pain?
The downside, some doctors say, is that overseas specialists base their second opinion only on medical data. There's no physical examination of the patient in Hong Kong.
I'm just going to maneuver your neck a little bit, right?
Dr. Clarence Leung is a private neurosurgery specialist.
Physical examination is a must before we can come to conclusion what is wrong with the patient.
Take the spine. An MRI scan can record many abnormalities.
Our spine do age, and as it ages, then you will see some abnormalities like bony spurs or the disc is getting dehydrated. How would you know which abnormality is an active problem of the patients unless you clinically examine them to see what's wrong with them, any telltale signs of what is wrong with their arms or legs or power.
Martin says his terms and conditions are clear. The second opinion is given without physical examination.
The same with Mayo Clinic. If you go to them, you submit the available information that you have, and based on that they give the opinion.
A lot of doctors in Hong Kong would tell you that Every patient who wants to get a second opinion needs to be physically examined. That is true in certain cases if you have orthopedic problem, but it doesn't really matter. In cases where there's no need for a physical examination. The case of Mrs. Zania is exactly the case where you don't need to physically examine her to make sure that the first diagnosis of a lymphoma is correct.
She says PET scans and blood tests give an accurate assessment.
A physical examination cannot help in this situation.
Mrs. Chan suffers from a herniated disc. One of her discs between the vertebrae in her neck is protruding and compressing her nerves.
Mostly feeling numb from my rear end down and the upper body.
The symptoms would localize in the arms, tingling sensation, radiating pain down the arm, weaknesses in the arm.
Her doctor at Queen Elizabeth Hospital said her only option was surgery.
If I do the surgery, I'd feel very uncomfortable. I don't want to accept it. I asked him what surgery would do. He said surgery is the riskiest. They will cut between two bones and connect them with a steel sheet.
Definitely surgery is not the only option, it's the last resort. When the doctors would suggest that the patient is now suitable for surgery, either the symptoms is very severe, or they are losing power in the limbs, or they've tried adequate period of conservative measures but failed. There are certainly risks involved in all kinds of surgery. The most severe form will be either nerve injury or spinal cord injury causing paralysis, but the risk is quite small nowadays, around 2 to 5%.
Mrs. Chan quit her job as a kitchen worker because she can no longer lift heavy objects. She now works part-time distributing flyers. She can't afford a second medical opinion from private clinics, nor seek one in another public hospital.
Unless the patient have some urgent situation and go into the A&E department of another hospital, then they will take care of the urgent situation. But for follow-up, the patients will still need to go back to the original treating hospital.
But all is not lost.
The patient can go into the so-called patient relation office to launch a complaint or to make an inquiry. We can try to help the patient to ask whether another treatment is available to her.
If someone can cure my illness, I'd work for him for free for 2 years.
Well, thank you for watching our show. It will be re-aired on Monday, Tuesday and Saturday, as well as online and on mobile apps. Until next time, from the Pearl Report team, good night, good luck and good health.